All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Tyler, it's Tanner, Kyle, we got Alec and Ryan in the crowd. We are Uncharted Engineering. It's a completely made up name just for this project. And our client is the Municipality of Anchorage, and they are represented by Daniel King. All right, our problem. The Anchorage housing crisis. There's a high demand with low inventory. The median house price in Anchorage is $400 to $5,000. This has been climbing for quite a while now, with an average time on the market being less than 30 days, if you're lucky, and an average home buyer age of 34 to 36 years old, with multifamilies being often too expensive to build or own nowadays. I personally have been affected by this housing crisis. With every house that I get or I throw an offer on, usually I'm outbid by 30, 40 grand within hours. And this is why I believe that the Municipality of Anchorage is trying to push these ADUs a little more so that more people my age could possibly move into them. And now you might ask, what is an ADU? It's an accessory dwelling unit. It's a smaller self-contained residential unit located on the same lot as a primary single-family home. And on the picture to the right, you can see it's an attic, a basement, can be attached or detached. And we have two detached ADUs for today. And the key component of this, or a characteristic, is they have to be independent and livable. And a couple of the names for these guys are granny flats or in-law suites, or most people just call them ADUs nowadays. I'm going to pass it to Tanner here.
So for our project background, so the Municipality of Anchorage has a goal of increasing housing within Anchorage. And so they set the goal of about 10,000 housing units within the next 10 years. To get to that goal, they wanted to have about 5,000 ADUs as part of that 10,000 house goal. To accomplish that, they've passed zoning changes, increasing allowed housing density on lots. Residential lots, and they've also implemented simpler reviews for these ADU houses. And part of that is the pre-approved ADU catalog. So the Municipality of Anchorage has a website where they have pre-approved designs for these ADUs. So the municipality went through the design and checked everything and make sure it was all good. And so then the designs will go up on this website. And so you can fill out some forms and then get the design. And once you have the design plans, then you can get your upfront permits and building permits and everything, and then go build that. So the pre-approved catalog, it'll come with like a reduction in upfront permit costs by about 50% because the Muni has already approved all the designs. Also, the elimination of design fees. So some previous ADU design costs were about $15,000. So this fee would go away since they have already been designed and approved. And then also a shorter review process. So instead of the designer going back and forth with the Muni on changing little things, since they're already been pre-approved, there's only a couple things the Muni will have to check, like site-specific stuff like a survey and your soil characteristics. And so that should hopefully bring the review process down to about 2 to 4 weeks.
All right, so now we're going to get into our project scope and some of our design considerations. So our scope for this project, the municipality asked us to develop 95% plans for 2 more ADUs to be added to this catalog. The first option that they asked us for was a large ADU option. The goal for this one was a unit that was 900 square feet or less. And the reason for this is that at 900 square feet, that can be placed on the majority of lots within Anchorage. Once you get beyond 900, it gets a little more difficult because then it's based on the size of the primary home. For this unit, they wanted a single-story unit, 2 bedrooms. The second option that they asked for was a tiny home ADU. For this one, they were looking for something that was 400 square feet or less. And then 400 was also a special number because under 400, special tiny home provision in the code applies. And this allows for some space saving measures such as lower ceiling heights, smaller living area requirements. This one also single story with a sleeping loft. Beyond that, we were given quite a bit of flexibility because, lots of personal preference goes into designing homes. So working with our architectural mentor on that. Design criteria for this. So some of our key criteria were that we designed for 160-mile-an-hour winds, as well as a 60-pound per square foot snow load. These are risk category 2, which encompasses most residential here in Anchorage. And the goal with these is that they can be placed in just about anywhere in Anchorage. There's still going to be some exceptions, such as some of the extremes way up on the hillside, for example. So with that, I'm going to get into our designs. So our first design here is Rendezvous, named it after one of the mountain peaks here in Anchorage. This was our large ADU option. So this one ended up being 896 square feet. We did get the 2 bedrooms to fit in it as requested, and it is single story. This rendering here that you see on the screen, so we took what we developed in our software. We asked AI to help us make it look photorealistic, and this is what it could look like if it was actually built here in Anchorage. Floor plan now that you see on the screen. So we went for a fairly open concept on this. So you can see down at the bottom there when you walk into the living room and then open up into the kitchen. We thought it would be important for a secondary means of egress, so we added a rear door there at the back of the kitchen. We also have a lot of windows in there, try and bring in some natural light into such a small space. Over on the far right-hand side there, you got the 2 bedrooms. We made them both large enough to accommodate full queen-size beds, and then a bathroom in between them. And then finally there in the middle, we went with a very oversized laundry room. The reason for this is that it could also double as a space for utilities if needed, such as HVAC, water boiler, anything of that nature. It's also a good central location where we added attic access and crawl space access. These are some 3D floor plans from our renderings. These give you an idea of what it might look like on the inside. These colors are just defaults. The homeowners will get to choose which finishes they actually want to see inside, but these should give you some perspective of how big it actually is on the inside. Next up here is a cross section. So it's what our building would look like if you cut it in half. So one of the goals of these was to keep them affordable, and so we tried to use as many standard building materials as possible. So we have some of the key components highlighted up there. Starting from the bottom, we're planning standard 8-inch CMU foundation for this unit, which is pretty typical here in Anchorage. In the middle there, you can see we have a 2x6 wood stud pony wall, and this is just to help support the floor load. Next, for our floor joists on this, we went with standard manufactured joists, which are locally available here. It's typical 2x6 exterior walls. And then finally up top for the truss design. So trusses are going to be designed per the manufacturer. However, we have preliminary designs and estimates with a Clutna truss. And then finally, this is what our ADU might look like on a sample lot here in Anchorage. So you can see ours up there circled with the white circle. As you can see, it's really not much different in size compared to that house at the bottom there. A little bit shorter than that one. However, compared to a large unit like the houses on the left there, you can see that it's a lot smaller and it fits very well in a backyard. And then with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tanner to talk about our next design.
So this is our tiny house ADU, named Mile High, following the naming scheme of peaks within Anchorage. It's about 400 square foot. It's a single story with a sleeping loft. Here are our floor plans. So on the left, you can see we've kind of got 2 entry doors. So one is optional. And so that would be modularity for like your specific site where you want the front door. And then as you walk in, you kind of got a mud area, Arctic entryway area. for taking your shoes off and everything. And then it kind of opens up into the living room and kitchen. And then you can see the bathroom there. And then on the sleeping loft, it's big enough to hold a queen size bed. And then there's going to be some need for railing there as well. And then secondary means of egress, that back door. It is optional. You can replace the door with a window if needed of the same dimensions. So here are some 3D rendering images that may help you like picture what could go into the space. You can see there we've got the bathroom and then the kitchen and then the Arctic entryway. There's a little hatch there right in front of the front door, and that would be to get down into the crawl space. There's not a ton of room in this little building, so we're expecting that mechanical and HVAC and stuff will be down in the crawl space. So you need that little hatch. And then we've got a ship's ladder to go up to the sleeping loft. So that ship's ladder will help reduce space impacts. If we had like a full staircase, it would take up a lot of room in this tiny house. And so now we get into the cross section. So we've got an 8-inch CMU foundation. Like Kyle said earlier, pretty typical with an Anchorage. And then we're using 9.5-inch BCI floor joists. These are the same for both the floor and the loft. So that way, when you're getting your materials, it's all the same and easy to get. We're using 2x6 exterior walls, typical framing at 16 inches on center, and then truss design per manufacturer. We were working with Acuna Truss to have an estimate and a rough design of what they would look like, which you can see there on the right one, the cross section. This house has a lot of big windows to let in the natural light, and yeah. Here's the small ADU on a sample lot. So you can see there in the backyard. If it's nicely in the backyard, it looks quite a bit smaller than the houses to the right and this house in front, because it is a lot smaller, so it'll fit good on almost any backyard. Part of our deliverables was also a cost estimate. So these cost estimates were like blank canvas, cold shell, so minus like cabinetry and finishes inside. Those will be up to the homeowner. And then also we kind of broke it out as if you hired a contractor to build the work or if you were doing the work yourself. So Rendezvous, our big ADU, if you hired a contractor, so with labor, it was about $255,000. And then just materials only was about $140,000. The smaller house, smaller ADU, Mile High with labor, so with a contractor, it's about $155,000 for them to build it. And then without labor, like you were building them yourself, about 90 grand. So.
All right, some of our lessons learned. The biggest one was schedules are only effective if they're reasonable. Initially, we had a very compressed schedule, and that did not work for us. We just initially started submitting incomplete work, and it just didn't work. So we had to space it out a little bit, and we ended up submitting something that we're pretty happy of. Our next one is to utilize modern software to save time, but you have to ensure there's a reasonable way to check it and make sure it's actually right. And then the earlier the better. Don't procrastinate. That's like the college rule for everyone. But I mean, and then free AI has its limitations. Funny story is we used an AI to make all the renderings, but it took us probably like 5 days just to make a nice rendering because it's only 3 tries per day. And that means like, yeah, it took us a little while. And those 3 tries were not the greatest. And a couple of special thanks. Our client, who is Daniel King. We got our professional architectural mentor, who is Petra Wilm, our professional structural mentor, who is Seth Anderson, and our faculty advisor, who is Scott Hamill. And thanks for being here. And any questions? Yes. Thank you. We appreciate that.
Talk about the structural design, what the considerations were, you had your structural design criteria, how did that affect what your layouts were, how did that affect your wall considerations, how'd that go?
Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, so for a question about structural design and shear walls. So the larger ADU, since it is a shorter house and pretty standard, shear walls weren't a huge problem for that. We had enough space along the walls for the structural to be okay. For the tiny house ADU, we did have to move some windows and stuff around to make sure that we had enough wall space for our hold downs and our other components of the shear wall. And we had to double check that with it, the walls being so high, it wouldn't cause any problems. So.
I know there's 2 of them already up on the website, but I think ours should hopefully be up within the next month, maybe 2 months.
I think reasonable timelines was something that came out of this presentation, so. We're hopefully by the end of summer, we'll have them definitely up. We have to do all of the review.
Sweet. Yes. I believe that would be up to the homeowner.
Please repeat the question.
The question was, is it going to be rented or bought on the lot?
Any questions about the intent of the project overall? Talk with Claire and I after the presentation.
The idea is that it's rented to someone who needs a place to live, but it could also be used as an office or for a family member.
Yes.
This might be outside the scope of your questions, but how does the homeowner know what requirements are needed for the plumbing? Accessory for city.
These are great questions.
Yeah. So just to repeat the question on that one, the question was about plumbing and whether or not that was consideration for this and how homeowners would deal with it. For this project, our scope was primarily just architectural and structural. But yeah, our client, the municipality, they'll have better answers for you on that.
So I guess the question was about square footage and the cost per square footage in the homes. Most of it was a rough estimate from contractors, so they really never had like a perfect number on that. So it could have been, I would assume it's going to be higher than what they would really quote it at. Plus we had a couple of like percents that we had to add on to it just to make it like reasonable for an amount that we have going on. Hopefully that answers your question.
Cost per square foot of an existing home is lower than the cost per square foot of build. That's closer to like 4.
Any other questions?